My wife, Victoria, recently got her driver's license. She was thrilled to finally be able to drive herself, but she was not yet experienced enough and was very nervous driving, especially when driving alone. Despite her caution, the roads were a source of constant stress for her, and every traffic light or sign caused her anxiety. One day, when she was traveling to visit her mother-in-law in our family car, she was stopped by the police for an ID check. Victoria was very anxious, as this was her first encounter with the police as a driver. The police officers noticed her inexperience and consternation, which immediately caught their attention. They began to behave quite aggressively, claiming that she had broken a lot of traffic rules. Victoria, despite her attempts to explain that she had not violated anything, could not counter their accusations. The police officers began listing fines for her alleged violations. They claimed she had speeded, failed to stop at a stop sign, and even ran a red light. Victoria was stunned and scared. Each time they added a new violation, the amount of fines kept going up, and eventually it came down to impounding the car. Our car was not just transportation, but an important part of our lives, and Victoria knew that losing it would be a disaster for both of us. That's when one of the police officers made a suggestion that shocked her. He said they could turn a blind eye to all the fines if she agreed to go with him in their patrol car for privacy. Victoria, confused and not knowing what to do, agreed in a panic to avoid further trouble. Her heart was pounding as she stepped out of her car. Her legs were shaking and her mind was racing with thoughts of what was going on and how she was in this situation. The policeman, a tall and confident man, gestured for her to follow him. The policeman opened the car door and gestured for her to get inside. She got into the back seat. As the door closed behind her, Victoria heard the second policeman say something to his partner, and they both laughed. After this incident, she continued on her way to her mother-in-law's house. On the way back from her mother-in-law's, Victoria encountered the same unpleasant situation again. She hoped it was just a coincidence, but her fears were confirmed when the same police car signaled for her to stop. She recognized the two policemen immediately. There was a look of horror on her face as they approached her window again, with the same arrogant smiles. The situation repeated itself almost exactly. The cops began charging her with imaginary offenses and threatening her with more fines, hinting that this time the impounding of the car was inevitable. Victoria, feeling deep despair and fear, again agreed to their terms and went to the patrol car. Back at home, she tried to remain calm and not show that anything had happened to her. However, her tension and anxiety was evident. A short time later, I almost had an accident myself, which prompted me to check the DVR footage in my car. I often check these recordings to analyze my driving and prevent mistakes, but this time, I was shocked by what I saw. The footage showed my wife getting out of the car and walking towards the police patrol car. It was enough to realize what had happened. I couldn't believe my eyes. My heart pounded like a hammer. My hands trembled. I was shocked and confused, not knowing how to react to this discovery. Immediately, I went to Victoria, with the recording on my phone, ready to demand an explanation. When I showed her the video, she turned pale and began to justify that she had no other choice, that she had done it for us to avoid trouble. But her words sounded hollow and unconvincing. The fact of cheating remained a fact, and it was breaking my heart. A storm of anger, frustration, and pain raged inside me. I realized I couldn't just forgive her and move on as if nothing had happened. Too much had been broken, and the trust between us was gone. I made the decision to file for divorce. It wasn't an easy decision, but I realized it was the only way out of the situation. After I learned the truth about Victoria's betrayal, I was determined to take revenge on those two policemen who had abused their position. My life couldn't stay the same, and I was ready to do whatever it took to bring them to justice. I began with careful planning. I knew I needed more evidence to make the trial a success. My goal was not just to expose them, but to punish them to the fullest extent of the law. I hunted them for a long time, driving around the neighborhoods where their car patrolled most often. I spent days and nights searching, watching the roads and patrols. Weeks passed before I was lucky enough to come across their patrol car again. It was on a quiet street near the center of town. They were standing off to the side, watching the passing cars, looking for the next victim. I immediately called the prearranged girl I had hired to execute this plan. Her name was Anna, and she knew exactly what was required of her. She drove up in her car, nervously pretending she had just gotten her license. The cops spotted her and pulled her over. I watched from a distance, keeping out of their sight. Anna, following our agreement, acted like she was scared and confused. The cops started charging her with imaginary offenses, just as they had with Victoria. Anna recorded everything on a hidden camera installed in her car. Then one of the cops offered her the same deal as my wife. avoid fines by secluding herself with him. All the while, I was holding a video camera with a high-powered zoom, recording everything that happened. The policeman took Anna to his car, and what happened next was captured on tape. After that, I took the tapes and headed home where I began to build a case against these corrupt officers. With the videos, the DVR footage from Victoria's car, and the new evidence from Anna, I was sure I was right. I hired the best attorneys to help me prepare my case. With their help, I drafted a lawsuit and filed it in court. The process was long and tedious, but I was determined to get justice. At the trial, my evidence had a bombshell effect. The cops tried to justify themselves, but all their attempts were in vain. The record spoke for itself. The court found them guilty of abuse of authority and sexual assault. Not only were they fired from their jobs, but they were also sentenced to prison terms. This moment was for me the culmination of a long journey toward justice. Finally, I felt I had achieved my goal. Those police officers would no longer be able to harm others, and I was able to start a new life knowing that I had done everything I could to punish those who had destroyed my family. Story 2. Ever since I was a kid, I had a passion for motorcycling. Every time I got on a motorcycle, I felt not only an adrenaline rush, but also an incredible sense of freedom. In this hobby, I found not only joy and excitement, but also my love, my wife Christina. We met at a motorsport event, and since then our passion for motorcycling has united us even more. We loved each other, raced together, and enjoyed every moment on the track. One day, however, my life changed dramatically. That day, I was competing in an important race that I had been preparing for months. The track was difficult, and I had to give my best. But at one point I lost control of my bike and crashed into a fence at high speed. As a result of the accident, I was seriously injured. I broke my leg, several ribs, and damaged my internal organs. I was rushed to the hospital, where doctors did everything possible to stabilize my condition. When I regained consciousness, I was told that I had a long and difficult road to recovery ahead of me. The doctors said that I would have to spend at least 6 months lying down so that my bones could heal and my internal organs could recover, and then another 6 months of wheelchair rehab. They also warned that if all went well, I might be able to walk again, but it wasn't a sure thing. My life, filled with speed and adrenaline, turned into endless pain and uncertainty in an instant. With each passing second, I realized that I was about to go through a huge ordeal. But I believed that with Christina's support and the strength of our love, we could overcome all difficulties and return to our former happy and active lifestyle. At first, Christina took care of me, helped me in everything. She was my support and encouragement during this difficult period. She spent every day by my side, prepared meals, made sure that I took all the necessary medications and procedures. Her care and love were a real lifesaver for me, because I realized that without her help it would have been much more difficult for me to cope with the pain and depression. However, by the 3rd month, her care began to diminish. Gone was the sincere help and involvement that had warmed me so much in the beginning. Everything began to be done by force, as if she was only doing her role out of obligation. I noticed that Christina began to spend less time with me, more often when out of the house, referring to different things. She no longer looked at me with the same warmth and tenderness as before. Her irritation was becoming more and more evident. She smiled less and less often and often looked tired and depressed. I could see how difficult it was for her to cope with her new role, and it broke my heart. It was especially hard to realize that I, as a man, was unable to fulfill my marital duties, and this annoyed Christina greatly. She often told me that she missed the ordinary life, the intimacy and joy we used to share. But there was nothing I could do about it. My body was immobile, and I was completely dependent on her help. Every day I struggled with feelings of helplessness and guilt for not being able to support her the way I should have. I hoped that in time things would change, that I could recover and get our life back on track. But each day spent in bed seemed like an eternity, and I felt more and more like our love was slowly fading under the weight of my condition. One night I woke up with an uneasy feeling that something was wrong. The room was plunged into semi-darkness, and only the light of Christina's phone screen illuminated her face. She had fallen asleep, leaving her phone unlocked beside her on her pillow. The suspicions that had been building up inside me for a long time became overwhelming. At that moment, curiosity and anxiety took over common sense. I gingerly picked up her phone, trying not to wake her up. My heart was beating so hard I was afraid she would hear it. At first I just scrolled through the screen to find something to reassure me, but instead I came across messages from a man I didn't know. His words were full of anticipation and expectation. He was texting her that he was looking forward to seeing her on an upcoming business trip and hinted at their private meetings. My hands trembled, and I felt a cold sweat break out on my forehead. I started reading the correspondence from the beginning and soon realized that there was a long-standing relationship between them. The messages were full of intimate details and words that Christina had never said to me. They discussed their meetings, future plans, and even shared how much they missed each other. My worst fears were confirmed. Christina had found another man to fulfill my marital duties. Every paragraph I read was like a knife in my heart. At that moment, I felt the world around me crumbling. All those moments when I suspected her of cheating, when I felt her care and attention disappearing, suddenly made sense. I was in shock and didn't know how to react. On the one hand, I wanted to sever all relations with her, kick her out of the house and forget that she had ever been a part of my life. But on the other hand, fear gripped me. Who would look after me then? I was dependent on her help, and that made the situation even more unbearable. I realized that in my current state I would not be able to cope alone, and this feeling of helplessness was terrible. So I decided to wait it out. I realized that I could not act impulsively. I needed time to recover and become stronger so that I wouldn't have to depend on her. I decided to hide my knowledge and pretend that nothing had happened. It was a hard choice to make, but I knew it was the only way to maintain my dignity and prepare for a future without her. A year passed. Rehabilitation, which seemed endless, was finally over. My efforts and patience had paid off, and I was able to care for myself on my own. Every day I took a step forward, regaining not only my physical health but also my mental strength. The recovery was long and difficult, but in the process I found a new source of strength. During my time in bed, I didn't allow myself to wallow in despair. Instead, I decided to put that time to good use. I started learning a programming language. It wasn't easy, but each new lesson learned and technology mastered gave me a sense of accomplishment and control over my life. I spent hours studying tutorials, watching video tutorials, and doing hands-on tasks. Gradually, my skills improved, and I started taking small projects on freelance platforms. My first earnings in IT were modest, but they gave me confidence in my abilities. With each new project, I became more experienced and confident, and soon my income started to grow. Financial independence was an important step for me to regain control of my life. I no longer felt helpless and dependent. When I finally felt like I was standing on my own 2 feet, both financially and emotionally, I realized it was time to take action. I could no longer tolerate Christina's betrayal and lies. I carefully prepared for the next step. Using the services of an experienced attorney, I gathered all the necessary documents and filed for divorce. This year has been a time of challenge and change for me. But thanks to my perseverance and commitment to self-improvement, I emerged from this crisis a stronger and more independent person. I started a new life, free from the shackles of the past and betrayal. My patience and preparation had paid off, and I was ready for the new challenges and opportunities that were now in front of me. I want to apologize right away for any errors in the text or dubbing. I am just learning, and the language of this channel is not my native language. The dubbing is done with the help of artificial intelligence. Please point out errors so I can fix them and improve the quality of the content. Also, I will be glad if you share your thoughts on the topic. Your support in the comments is very motivating for me to keep looking for new, interesting stories. Thank you for your understanding and participation. Subscribe to the channel and put a bell to not miss new stories.